Howdy readers, I'm Jason. This is Chapter and Verse, and tonight we are going to be talking about this play here. This is Wit by Margaret Edson. So this is the latest video in the series that I'm doing this year on mortality. I will link the announcement video for that series in the description box below. In addition, I'll list the rest of the plan for the year. The other films we're going to watch, the other books we're going to read, and when we're going to watch and read them. I had not read the play until this month. There was an HBO film made of it, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, I want to say, that we're going to be watching later this month. And I had seen the film a long time ago, but I had never actually read the play until now. And I just remember being devastated by the movie. And reading the play actually devastated me too. So what is Wit? Wit is about a character named Vivian Baring. She is a university professor. She is a specialist in the poetry of John Donne, particularly the Holy Sonnets. And I want to say she's in her early 50s, if memory serves. And she is diagnosed with cancer, with advanced cancer. And this is the story of her final days, essentially. It's a very, very short play. It is 85 pages in this hardcover. And so that's really it. I mean, that's really the plot, right? Vivian Baring, university professor of English, is diagnosed with cancer, undergoes experimental intense treatment of cancer. And that's it. That's all. It's super lean, and it is super powerful. So there is one scene early on in the play that I find to be the most important scene in the play. It just sets the stage. And that is on page 13. And in the scene, Vivian is remembering an encounter she had with her mentor when she was an undergraduate. And her mentor was the kind of world's leading expert on John Donne. And Vivian's written a paper on one of Donne's poems, and her mentor is just raking the paper over the coals, just raking her over the coals. So her mentor, E.M., she is referred to as, says, "Please sit down. Your essay on Holy Sonnet 6, Miss Baring, is a melodrama, with a veneer of scholarship unworthy of you, to say nothing of Donne. Do it again." Then Vivian stutters a little bit, and then her mentor says, "You must begin with the text, Miss Baring, not with a feeling." All right, so when I read this, okay, it wasn't until this afternoon when I was working on my notes for this video that I really feel like I fully got it, that I understood what that line was all about. When I first read it, she says, "You must begin with a text, Miss Baring, not with a feeling." I felt like it was dismissive of feeling, okay? That feeling shouldn't enter into the equation, right? That you begin with the text and you stay with the text. You need to write objectively about the text. But this afternoon, reading that again, it occurred to me that that's not what is going on here. When she says you must begin with a text, Miss Baring, not with a feeling, it seems to me that what is implied in that is that feelings should come into the process later. Okay, you don't start there, but you can end there. All right. Kelly and I have been having a lot of conversations recently about poetry, and I've told her that any given poem teaches you how to read it, right? What it's doing with punctuation, what it's doing with capitalization, what it's doing with line breaks. And that's what's going on here, right? So her mentor's big problem is that Vivian used an edition of the poem that changed up the punctuation and introduced a kind of histrionic element to it. And that's not what needs to happen with this poem, right? The original punctuation, she says, is what Donne intended, and it changes the meaning of the poem. So you start with the text itself, the ink on the page, and then you let the text kind of dictate to you what your emotional engagement or involvement should be. So on the very next page, when her mentor is kind of going through this with her and explaining to her what she's talking about, she says, "And death shall be no more, comma, death thou shalt die." As she recites this line, she makes a little gesture at the comma. Nothing but a breath, a comma, separates life from life everlasting. It is very simple, really. With the original punctuation restored, death is no longer something to act out on a stage with exclamation points. It's a comma. It's a pause. And what is lovely about that is that the text itself is explaining to us what our emotional kind of investment is in that. And I think that's beautiful. Okay, it's absolutely beautiful. Now from there, we move on to the kind of medical drama. The failure of the doctors in this play is that they begin with Vivian as a text, and they don't know what to do with it. They haven't learned the lesson that Vivian learned from her professor that day. You start with the text itself, and then you let the text dictate to you, or govern, or determine how kind of emotionally invested you should be. We think of Vivian as a text because Vivian is telling us to think of her as a text. On page 37, full of subservience, hierarchy, gratuitous displays, sublimated rivalries, I feel right at home. It's just like a graduate seminar. With one important difference. In grand rounds, okay, the doctor's making the rounds, discussing her case with each other in front of her. They read me like a book. Once I did the teaching, now I am taught. Then on page 53, she tells us, but I flatter myself. The article will not be about me. It will be about my ovaries. It will be about my peritoneal cavity, which, despite their best intentions, is now crawling with cancer. What we have come to think of as me is, in fact, just the specimen jar, just the dust jacket, just the white piece of paper that bears the little black marks. So Vivian is the text, right? She's a cancer patient. She's a perfect candidate for an experimental treatment. She is a kind of tabula rasa that the doctors are going to write a story of kind of research and progress on. But they are oblivious to her, okay? They are oblivious to her. They ask her how she is doing. She gives them the same answer again and again, all right? And like the fools they are, they take what she is saying to them at face value. They don't look deeper, right? They don't look with subtlety, with nuance. They don't look with humanity, right? That's really the problem. Where is their humanity? Where is their feeling? Where is their sensitivity to the suffering of their patient, right? Because she is a patient to them. She's not a person to them. And that's the issue. There is a young doctor in the play named Jason, unfortunately, who again and again, just demonstrates what I'm talking about here. He starts with the text, but he leaves feeling completely out of it, right? He's utterly clueless. In fact, at one point, he is having a conversation with Vivian there in her room, and he says, oh, no way. Compromised kidney function is a highly complex reaction. I'm simplifying for you. Thank you, she says. We're supposed to, he says. And she says, bedside manner. He says, yeah, there's a whole course on it in med school. It's required. Colossal waste of time for researchers. I can imagine, she says. Earlier in the play, we see instance after instance of his callousness, right? On page 29. So he's beginning his examination of her, right? Getting her feet up in the stirrups, etc., etc. And then he remembers, oh, I need the nurse here, right? There's supposed to be someone else in the room when I have a female patient in a compromised position or situation. He says, got to have a girl here. Some crazy clinical rule. A crazy clinical rule. Yeah, that's pretty silly. So on the very next page, he's talking to the nurse about how he took Vivian's class on John Donne when he was in college. It says, trying to be casual. He says, Professor Baring was very highly regarded on campus. Okay, he is referring to her in the past tense, in her presence. There's just something really troubling about that. On the very next page, page 31, right? Again, right? He's talking to the nurse. He's talking to Vivian. He says, yeah, I survived Baring's course. He's using the word survived about a difficult class in college in front of a woman he's just examined who is dying of cancer. The bedside manner class didn't take with Jason here. So at the very end of the play, all right, possible spoiler here, Vivian has coded. and she has already denoted herself as DNR, do not resuscitate. Jason knows this. He is aware of it. But he is trying to bring her back. And Susie, the nurse, runs in, and she's just freaking out. What are you doing? Because you do not try to resuscitate someone who's DNR. He says, a goddamn code, get over here. She says, she's DNR. And what does he say? He says, she's research. I find that so cold and so brutal, but so true as well. For those of you who have had any interactions with doctors or hospitals, etc., it seems to me that for every one who has really genuine bedside manner, there are two who have none, for whom your suffering, your fear, your trauma, it's there for them as a puzzle to solve, and that's it. They couldn't give two shits about how you feel in the matter. They're reading your problem as a text, and they're not engaging their own hearts in the solution, which I think is just a tragedy, really. So the last thing I wanted to mention is that this whole play put me in mind of a particular speech from Shakespeare's As You Like It. So near the very end of the play, right, just before Vivian codes, her professor E.M. Ashford, her mentor, who's 80 years old now, comes to see her. And Vivian is not conscious. And E.M. has a book, I believe, that she's bought for her granddaughter in a bag, right? And it's The Runaway Bunny by Margaret Wise Brown. And she reads the book to Vivian, right? This board book, essentially, to Vivian as she sleeps, as she suffers through this pain at the end of this journey. And it made me think of this speech, right, that Jaques gives in As You Like It. It's the speech that was Jonathan Bates' inspiration for his biography of Shakespeare called Soul of the Age, where he looked at Shakespeare through the different periods in his life. And I'm just going to read that to you. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail, unwilling to school, and then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow, then a soldier, full of strange oaths, and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly with good capon lined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances, and so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. So I was reminded of that because at the end of Wit, we see this woman who is a giant of academia, right? She's this intellectual titan, really, and her illness has reduced her to essentially infancy again. And this mentor, who was maybe the most important person in her life, right? Vivian's not married, she has no kids. This mentor returns and she reads to Vivian The Runaway Bunny, and she's become like a child again. She's come full circle, and I just found it beautiful. I found even reading it really difficult to kind of keep the tears back. So watching the film again later this month is going to be tough. But that is Wit. If you read it, let me know what you think in the comments below, and I look forward to chatting about the film with you guys later this month as well. So yeah, have a good evening. Adios.